Okay, everyone. Well, once more, thank you for having me today. And do let me know if at any point my voice gets scratchy or it gets noisy. It's because I have a pretty old laptop for that matter. And if you hear funny noises in the background, that would be my dog stretching or just feeling bored. So please, don't mind that. Okay, so why conversations? Like, what made me think of conversations? Well, I do think conversations are integral parts of our everyday life. Basically, I don't think we can avoid them because even if we do not wish to talk to other people, we would also have some sort of a chatter happening inside of us. So the idea of conversation is both personal and public. It's a form of an encounter that we all have, whether it's between ourselves or with others. And so the conversation is a space. It's a space that we bring ourselves into. And if we are talking to other people, then it becomes a space of mutual exchange. And so I personally have had some of the most empowering as well as disempowering moments in my life that resulted because of conversations, not because of anything else, not because of an event that happened or something that I learned about. It was some of the most profound changes I've had in my life, in the negative and the positive, have been because of conversations. And I would like to share with you this. So basically, I want to explain to you, why am I here? How did I reach here? And I'd like to share with you the story of Donald Duck. So when I was about 13 years of age, I applied for a national scholarship that helped us or just financed us to go and do the international baccalaureate, which was, by the way, that was back in Italy. I remember, so the process of selection took us through a number of stages. So first, it took us through whether we speak the basic English we needed because the degree was taught in English. And then it was about general knowledge and personality. And then it was a rigorous interview process, and then with families as well. So in my exam, after I passed the first one, in my exam, the second section in the exam was all about political science, all about general knowledge. I was 13. I couldn't bear it. It was a very hot summer in Cairo. I could not bear what was going on to me. And finally, there was this, I just ignored everything. It was a very long multiple choice one. And then there was this essay that asked us about Franz Kafka, the author. He wrote a book called The Metamorphosis, and basically it's a story of a man who morphs into an insect. So the question was, what would you be, or who would you be, and why? I decided in that moment, as a result of my inner chatter, as the conversation was happening inside of me, that I'm just going to be myself. I'm bored and I would like to get out of this situation as soon as possible. Now, at that moment, I wanted to be Donald Duck. That's all I wanted to be. My reasons: Donald Duck does not have any responsibilities like the one that I was suffering with in that very hot room. 2, Donald Duck does make people laugh, so I might as well have something to learn from him. And that's it. That's all I did. We learned later on, me and my family, that I actually failed that exam. I failed it. I think I scored 17 out of 50 or something like that. However, they contacted my family because they said, your daughter wanted to be a cartoon character, and it means that she just wanted to be herself. So we want to meet with her. This is the example of the first kind of conversation that I had that was between me and myself. Now let's move on to the next 2 conversations that were with others. By the way, I won the scholarship because of Donald Duck. Okay, now to the next one, which is discovering how conversations could be empowering or disempowering, the hard and easy way, this time with others and not with myself. And I'm going to share with you examples of 2 supervisors that I had. In my PhD, I had a very unfortunate experience with my supervisor who did not like my work. and who, in a moment of tension between me wanting to tell my story and this is what I want, he held my manuscript and he told me, you will be an embarrassment. By the way, this was resolved afterwards, and this is way behind this. But that was a very disempowering moment, because basically I did not ask for that, and I did not know how to take this and translate it into an action that helped me move from A to B, right? Now let's go back, years back in my master's, when I won the award by nomination for my research about outstanding research in modern Egypt. I had no idea when I was doing my research that this award existed to begin with. I had no clue about that. But when I won it, I remember I went to my MA supervisor and I thanked him very much. And I told him, you know what? We did this. And then he looked at me and he said this. He said, I supervised 10 other people and you're the only one who won it. Remember that. You have to remember that. So I just gave you 3 examples of 3 conversations, 3 moments of encounter, some as a chatter inside me, and 2 that happened with others. One that was really, really a tough one, and one that was really inspiring and empowering. So I would like to invite you to look at conversations as opportunities, not of perfection, but of truth, of ways that we can inspire others. And the way I'm going to approach this today is that I'm being very specific about the kinds of conversations you have as one-on-one basis. And I understand that due to the nature of our jobs and to the stress of every day, and also what our job requires, sometimes we are not encouraged to be very open. So I would like to be very specific here. And that I understand the, sorry, I'm just fixing something here. Yeah, I understand that there are situations where we are required to coach the problem, that we are only focusing on the problem. I know that. But I would like to challenge you a little bit in here in the context of when you have the choice to have a one-on-one conversation where you do not have to abide by very strict prescripted rules, then I invite you to coach the person and not the problem. So in that regard, I would like to tell you a sketch of the difference between them. That when we coach the problem, we are providing a solution, we are handing a solution. There is an element of it's being transactional. There is a question and then there is an advice that goes in exchange. You play the role of the provider. You're there to provide something. And then the equation in the conversation is that there is a provider and a recipient. So it's not really very equal. And there is an element of information downloading from 1 to 2. What I would like us to focus on today is, however, whenever you can, is to coach the person and not the problem. And I treat anybody else who is with you in the one-on-one conversation as your thinking partner. That you are thinking partners you have mutuality as an experience of a shared experience during that conversation. That you have elements of familiarity, and that you would like to create a sense of community, even if it's only between 2 people. And that there is an element of safety, that it is safe, it's a safe space, it's a safe place for people, for everyone who's being part of that conversation. Coaching the person means that you have to invite the non-judgmental sides of you, and that you're trying to be supportive in the way that empowers rather than does the homework on behalf of the other. And we will unpack this in the next slides. So basically, when we coach the problem, what happens is the thinking partners over there, the problem sits and stands between you and the other person in the one-on-one conversation. You see the other person through the problem. So it's almost as if they're standing behind the problem. So you see them by proxy. But what I would like us to focus on today is that as thinking partners, we are on the same level. It's a peer-to-peer. You have this conviction that the other person is able, or is at least able to believe that they can. So in this webinar, it focuses on the situational contexts where you coach the person and not the problem. Today's objectives are to identify your listening style while you are in the conversation, to differentiate between listening styles and their appropriate uses. When should you use what, which one? It's not that there is one that is always worse than the other or one that is better than the other, but it's just for you to be able to, you're the maestro, you're going to play, which instrument will you make louder than the other one? But you're going to understand the typical limiting beliefs holding back young women, identify the limits of advising, that sometimes advising can be disempowering, and to apply the empowering conversation framework. So how do I approach this webinar? I'm going to approach it by focusing first on you, your own vulnerabilities and opportunities, and actually bringing your own vulnerability to the conversation can be an opportunity. Creating a safety space within you first, actually this should be a safe space within you first, and embracing uncertainty. The second part of this webinar, or the other part of this webinar, will focus on the participants who in this case are young women and who have their own expectations from the conversation with you, the one-on-one conversation with you, who come with their own beliefs and who come with their own assumptions. And we're going to unpack this together. But first, before I start moving on, I have a reflection for you. I want to ask you, your immediate hunch, do you coach the problem or the person? And if you look in the chat box, there is a link that you can click and it will take you to a dashboard. Click anywhere and start typing. You don't see the link, hold on. I will stop sharing screen here and I will send you the link. 1 second. Oh, there we go.
Okay, I sent it.
Thank you. Great, so we're starting to see answers here. I will share with you the screen in just a minute, just to give everybody the chance to type their answers. Right, so maybe I should start sharing the screen with you. Okay, there we go. Right, can everybody see? Good.
Yeah.
So here are the answers. So it says, it depends on how well I know the person. Fair enough. I suppose this also depends on how you define coaching. That's also true. I try to coach the person through the problem. Very well said. Depends if it's clear what the other person wants. Is it practical help or advice? It depends on time, mood, energy, and openness. Exactly. It's an incredibly fluid experience. It doesn't have to be pre-scripted. That's the point. It depends on the relationship with the person. Sometimes you are rushing coaching. Yes, so time is a component of the availability of the inclusivity of the space in that moment, isn't it? Right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. So I will switch back to our presentation, and yeah. Okay. So you're absolutely right in everything you said. All the elements that you brought up, time, the context, the fluidity of the situation, these are all elements in the conversation that the overall take from your responses is that you need to be present in the situation. This is part of your listening skills. It depends on what you're prepared for, not only on what the other person wants, but who do you bring with you, the elements that you bring with you into the conversation as well. The point is that you're trying to create a sense of community in the conversation, even if you are only talking to one person, even if it's only two of you. Safety is a component of a sense of community. You can talk to someone that you don't know, but then both of you have this sense of shared safety, can create a temporary but very useful moment of community. And that you are establishing a sense of familiarity as well. And this familiarity can also help us create a non-judgmental space and a sense of mutuality, that the vulnerability or the issues is not something that you are alone in. It is something that is, more broadly speaking, much more humanistic in nature. And that can lead you to, from these spaces, that can lead you to, it informs how you are supporting and empowering the other. So, how do we establish familiarity in a conversation? Familiarity is one of the components that can make a conversation feel more safe and inclusive. One of the ways that you can bring this into light is by looking at vulnerability as a common human experience. And in here, I'm inviting you to look at your own vulnerabilities that you can bring into the conversation as an opportunity. It's not that you're going to download all your vulnerability on somebody else, but it's just that you would feel safe with the fact and idea that you can also be vulnerable in a conversation when you are required to provide support and empowerment. That still, this should not stop you. So this is just a very gentle invitation for you to reframe how you can see vulnerability within yourself, to feel safe enough with it, to be able to bring it to the conversation as well. So you can bring this with you in the conversation. You can bring this with you in the conversation also when you are, even when you are not very sure what to do with it. All right, so here's another reflection. And what do you bring to the conversation? When you go to a conversation, what do you bring with it? What elements of your own experiences do you bring into it? I'm going to share a link with you. I think I just lost my cursor. So hold on a second. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'll stop sharing the screen for 1 second and we'll go here. It will be in your chat. So there's another link that I sent in the chat where you're invited to answer the question, what do you bring into the conversation? We have great answers here. We bring our personal demons. Yes, right. Wow, these are amazing. Okay, I'm going to start sharing with you so that you see, because it's anonymized. Here we go. So I bring my humanity. I bring my willingness and openness to help the other person feel comfortable and reassured. I bring my experiences that are relevant to my conversation partner. I try to understand. I bring my empathy. I bring an ear, reassurance, empathy and warmth, active listening to put the person at ease, unique perspective, past experiences, reformulation of sentences of the person and sharing similar experiences, conversation with the lessons learned from others, maturity, experiences, and my culture, being a mother, work background, exactly, you bring the person in you into it. My own experiences and choosing on the conversation, I try to relate to people as much as possible. We bring our personal demons, insecurities and prejudices, biases, life experiences, absolutely. All of this comes with us, all of this walks with us. All of this walks with us into the conversation, absolutely. So it's very, very important that you are able to see that you're actually, it's not robotic, it's very normal. It's actually, you should feel safe bringing all this with you into the conversation, because in vulnerabilities, in not knowing, in uncertainties, there are also spaces for you to tap into them, because they, as the feelings that they bring you are also information, they are sources of information for you to tap into them. Right, so the component of the conversation, what, if I'm going to summarize or synthesize your answers, you're bringing your identity, your realities, and your stories. And it's the same for the other person as well. That the stories, it's about the stories that our brain is, we have, if our brains are boxes of stories, we're isolating an individual story, and we're mixing this to different degrees with our identities, our realities, to share those stories. Now, the stages of engagement and listening, what are they? So there is you listening intellectually, you're observing the information, it's with your body. You're observing the information and you're collecting it. You're basically, you're pinning down things on the wall. And then after you're pinning that, and then your mind is analyzing, your mind is judging that, your mind is trying to attach meanings to the kinds of stories that you are invited to be part of in that conversation. And then there's your heart, where you bring your feeling into it. And so there is an added layer of engagement with it. And then finally, the deepest, the soul, or you could also call it still the heart, and that it's an incubation where you're not listening to respond anymore. You're actually receiving, and you're allowing whatever you're receiving to be in a safe space within you, and not having the pressure of performance, not having the pressure of, I have to reply, I have to say something about that. It's okay if you let things sit within you and allow your intuition more or less to help you engage with it. So these are the levels of engagement. And obviously, depending on different situations in our lives, we use them interchangeably, sometimes subconsciously as well. So that was about you. All that we've covered so far was about you. Who do you bring into the conversation, and the different levels that you bring into the dynamics of the conversation. Now, what are some of the challenges that your thinking partners might be facing? Well, obviously, it's very challenging to generate a sense of meaningfulness in everyday life experiences when there is a persistent sense of uncertainty. Also, even if when we are offering activities that could break away from stressors, sometimes because the thinking partners are aware that these activities are within the context of a very temporary situation, that this could end up empowering or this could reinstitute a sense of temporality within your thinking partner, that it would make them want to ask for certainty even faster. Your thinking partner might also come, as you bring your own self, your thinking partner is also coming with her own histories, with her own problems, with her own beliefs and assumptions, her own beliefs about what she is able to control today, and her own assumptions about what she should or should not predict tomorrow. And so some of the typical issues that come up are that your thinking partner might come with the belief that there is usually no space for mistakes because mistakes are very costly. There is a sense of shame that could hinder your thinking partner from moving to A to B. That there could be a sense of normalization of ingrained unequal power dynamics, such as patriarchy, that this is what should happen. That the expression of self-preferences could be perceived as selfish. That seeing the self through the others is the automatic pilot of thinking about the self instead of seeing the self through the self. And that pleasing sometimes could be an adaptation mechanism, and it could take a wide range of ways of expressions. So what is the framework? What is the framework that I would like to propose when we are in a conversation where we would like to empower our thinking partners? This framework is primarily, if not entirely, about you. That first of all, I'm inviting you to remove from yourself the pressure of performance. That if this is a one-on-one conversation, as I opened up my presentation, in this very specific context, it's a one-on-one conversation where it's not necessarily because you're advising someone for a legal advice or because you are in a very formalized context. No, I'm talking about a different context that could allow you to be more flexible. So when this is the case, and it is about the person and not the problem, removing the pressure of performance from yourself can open up for more possibilities. Remember that most often than not, we also bring our beliefs about what's happening in the present and our own assumptions or unpredictabilities about the future. And that is the difference between what we can control right now and what we can predict about tomorrow. So questions, some of the questions that you could consider are that you could ask the question in the form of what? Because what can, I know that there is a lot of people, would say why is more open. And in here, I would also like to say that what doesn't have to be very bad either. Because what does is that it encourages your thinking partner to list things more specifically. And by list, I mean they express them. So what is on your mind? What is on your mind? What's happening now? And when don't stop there, encourage, give a nudge, and then ask, what else? What else is there? And remember that it's absolutely fine to embrace moments of silence. And once this is said, all right, so what is the real challenge for you here and now? What you're doing is that you are pinning down the conversation into what is the belief now and what is the assumption now? What are we talking about, the actual, what can we control now and what do we predict about tomorrow that we cannot control? What do you want? Now, this is the challenge from this space, from this as information. What do you want? What do you want? How do you want to, where would you like to be? And then here you can begin to offer, how can I help? What can I do exactly? Now that you allowed yourself to see through your thinking partner's own eyes, through the questions that you began with, you could now offer, how can I help? And when you discuss that, sometimes we understand things by explaining to ourselves what they are not instead of what they are. So if you are saying yes to something, what are you saying no to? Because sometimes in the same breath that we are saying yes to, we're also saying no to something else. And the opposite is true. When you're saying no to something, in that same breath, you're also saying yes to something else. And what was most useful to you in all of that? In my help, in what you would like to do, in if you're saying yes to something and no to something, what is the most useful one for you? And one of the things that I'm sure a lot of you are aware of is the power of self-reflection, is to encourage your thinking partner to reflect on their own steps. And even though we want to reach big, there is very transformative power in the small steps. Encourage the small steps. And with the small steps, sometimes, because they're very little, they might give us the illusion that we're very slow or that progress is very minimal. And that's where self-reflection can come into the equation to remind us. So encourage your thinking partners to use self-reflection using different tools. And remember that this is not a surgical treatment of an issue, but it's a muscle of self-discovery, of embracing that your thinking partner wants to discover her own agency. And it's a muscle that we need to train and encourage and nudge. So by coaching the person, you're helping your thinking partner to climb a tree from which they can observe their own issue. You're inspiring your thinking partner to attach an alternative meaning to the storylines that they are telling you as well as about themselves. You are inviting your thinking partner to revisit the beliefs and assumptions that they have about what they can control today and the predictions they have on tomorrow. And that by doing that, by bringing your own vulnerabilities, by removing the performance, by opening a safe, non-judgmental space, you're creating a momentary but very powerful sense of community with your own thinking partner. One of the things that I would like to invite you to consider is that when you remove from self the pressure of performance sometimes, you can also embrace non-reactive empathy, that you don't have to immediately jump with an advice. Sometimes jumping in with an advice can remove the agency from your thinking partner and puts it from her on you. And so instead of encouraging your thinking partner to embrace the process, you're just providing a ready-made answer. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So remember that not advising every time, jumping, wanting to advise, can be replaced by asking different kind of questions where you can embrace your own curiosity about how much they can go. And remember that you don't want to be stuck in the other person's story. It's okay to be sensitive, but sensitivity on its own does not always bring practical solutions. You aim to understand, not just to sympathize. Use your compassionate curiosity. And sometimes when you put the bar up too high that you want to reach transformative power, sometimes it works against you because you add this pressure on yourself. So invite yourself to trust the process more, because it's not a race to an outcome. And it's okay to put boundaries around what you're capable of doing and what you're not capable of doing. And transformative action is not the same as fixing. Transformation also happens in small steps. Basically, your compassionate curiosity is that your brain is curious. You bring your brain into it, bring your curiosity into it, bring the compassion from your heart, and bring the courage from your gut where you can challenge your thinking partner. It's okay to do that. And remember that challenge could be a comma in a sentence, that sometimes it's something that could be more inspiring than any other one. And to me, I define confidence as that we could build our trust, that we will figure it out, that we don't have to have answers the whole time, and that certainty does not have to be a precondition for feeling more confident. So, of course, what I'm talking about you, about the conversation, about me, about us, about the thinking partner, is that change in the end, when we talk about transformation as an expression of change, change is easy. There is easy change and there is hard change. There is the change by doing. I do, so I know more, so I do more. So for example, for that, I say I write because I want to publish more. But there's a different kind of change which is harder, and that's the change by being, that I change my sense of identity that informs my actions. So it starts with I am a writer, so I do more of it because I am a writer. So I write because I'm already a writer and I want to become a writer. So that's where you attach more of your actions to the identity. So to sum up today, we identified the different ways of engaging. We realized that we have that there is no hierarchy, that you can use them interchangeably. That more often than not, we are talking about assumptions and beliefs, the beliefs that could hold, that beliefs that tell us the sense of meaning we attach to what we can control today, and the assumptions about what we should predict about tomorrow. And that jumping to advising, might not always be the best thing to do. And that there are a number of questions that we could bring into the conversation so that they help us, excuse me, so that they help us see through our thinking partner's eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was great. I guess it's time for questions now, and we can discuss anything that came up that anyone would like to discuss. There was so much good information there. I feel like I need to absorb it. But if anyone wants to ask anything, then go ahead now. Oh, we have a question in the chat. Nice. How can you bring up a difficult topic that the other person is avoiding talking about, but you know is necessary to move forward? Good question.
That's a great question. I think the trick in here is to allow the other person see what you're seeing in a way without, you want to create a safe enough space, you can challenge, and here you can use your gut. So we said, your brain, your heart, and your gut, where you can bring a little bit of a challenge in here, where it's a gentle nudge to try and encourage that person to climb the tree and see the problem from above a little bit. And so I would say that you can create, one way is that you could share a similar situation about yourself or about someone else that could inspire that person or encourage that person to talk about themselves. But it takes time. It takes time. For that person to open up, they need to really trust the safe space between you and the person. Yeah.
I was wondering about maybe some challenges that come up in our kind of daily activities here. Might, these are challenging conversations, but there might be the added challenge of language barriers and cultural differences, and how we factor that in when trying to talk someone through a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to address a specific challenge for that, or you're talking on the more general level?
Yeah, I think I was thinking more generally, just I think sometimes when there are those challenges, you have to kind of think even more clearly about the points that you've told us about today, and make sure that you're translating these kind of small steps in an understandable and kind way, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I guess it was more of an observation than a question, but
Yeah, I think if this sense of familiarity, or that we share something, and and that's why vulnerability could be a space that can shorten the distance, that I'm not the only one vulnerable here. Vulnerability is being experienced by you as well.
yeah.
So even despite of cultural differences or linguistic barriers, of course, linguistic barriers are going to make it very difficult to communicate. But at least if you leave that conversation today with both people feeling that they feel a bit more familiar with each other, that this in itself could be a very minor micro step of transformation.
I think I found like if you show, even if you're struggling to communicate with someone, if you show that you're willing to spend time with them, even though you might not necessarily be talking a lot, but you're there for them like physically and you're giving them time, that can kind of build that connection, not on a like speaking level, but just, you know, on like being comfortable with each other. And then eventually maybe you'll get to the point where you could communicate better.
Yes, exactly. If that person, because that's no longer about the problem, it's about the shared experience of both of you or about the person. And so if there's a race to try and answer that problem, it might, even with the best of intentions, it might in itself put that barrier again.
Mm.
Yeah.
Karen said in the chat, which is a good point, that a lot of organizations have a regular turnover of volunteers, which makes building trust difficult. I think that's really true.
That's such a big challenge. I totally agree with you. And that's the thing, trust and say a sense of safety does take time. It's not something that we can bring um, in a short time at all. And that's a really tricky situation. I completely agree with it. Okay, is the kind of listener coach you are encouraging something that needs training? Or do we rely on our own experiences? I ask because what you are suggesting can be quite challenging. Building trust, vulnerability, stepping back and jumping in with advice. Okay, so that's a great question. I'm going to break it down into parts. So the kind of listener is something that you can, it doesn't require a lot of training at all. I think in my view, it's very simply, when you are sitting in a conversation with somebody you know, you can observe what you're in that familiar space for you. Try and see whether you're trying to listen, whether you're building up the answer in your head as they talk. Have you started to answer in your head in preparation to answer? That will give you a little bit of an idea about how the type of presence you bring to the conversation. So if you notice that you're constantly preparing for an answer, maybe slowly, you can try to slow that down, right? And you know, see what would happen. Of course, if you're doing this with in a safe space with somebody you already know, it might be a good idea to do that. And so I think the good place to start is to observe yourself in a space that is familiar. Building the trust and vulnerability. Of course, building the trust is something that is mutual. It's like it takes two to tango. So putting this on yourself only is unfair to you. But if you, by bringing your own vulnerability, I mean that you feel that it's okay to say you don't know, that you feel that it's okay that you can understand or that you cannot see the full picture, that you bring your own truth into it, that it's okay for you to have to express your own limits in the conversation. That's an expression of vulnerability that you can bring there, as simple as that. That you can say that you would like to help and support, but you have your own limits as well. It's okay. If you express your own limits as well, the other person, you know, it's a form of expressing your own truth as well in that conversation. Encouraging the person to, and finally encouraging the person to observe. You see, I think we have this urge to advise because we want to, because we feel this is the best thing to do. But sometimes it's maybe we will if we do this too quickly, then we will stop ourselves and the other person to discover an additional dimension about themselves that we don't know, that the advice is going to block it, you see. So maybe if we not wait, but try to explore more, which is why compassionate curiosity comes into the conversation, that you try to see more through your thinking partner's eyes, that you try to explore more through their eyes. This will also inform you, not just them.
Yes, Hadi, I've been listening to you very intently, and what you're saying is very interesting. It's almost as though you're suggesting that the listener coach needs to be seen as a mere mortal, not as someone who's going to bring results. And a mere mortal can make mistakes.
Exactly.
And in my own experience, that part of the trust comes from the other person understanding that you are a mere mortal, you do make mistakes, but together, the two of you can come up with something that is tangible and offer some support to the person that's in front of you. But my question is a word that you raised, which is observation. Now, you're talking about, let's say, just the situation of two people, the listening coach and the thinking partner. Each is observing the other, and in some way, you're trying to think of that the listener coach somehow is able to observe herself or himself. And that, in my experience as a teacher trainer, is one of the most difficult things, and it can take such a long time. I want to put you in at the deep end. How do you help a listener coach to self-observe? How?
That's a wonderful question. That's a wonderful question. And I'm really grateful that you asked it. If you want to be a good, like what I'm trying to say, if you want to bring the observant listener coach in the conversation, then I think that you will need to cultivate listening to yourself away from the conversation as a skill. So generally, if you're someone who is able to listen to yourself away from any conversation with anybody else, you will bring this into the conversation itself. So by that, I mean that maybe what I'm trying to say is that it's a muscle that you're training, right? So you can train it outside of the conversation, outside of the field, right? So how do we do that? Reflection, taking a breath before you answer, observing with your friends, asking friends that you have a 10 minutes conversation, and then you take time, take a breath between their question and when you want to answer. So if you are somebody who wants to observe yourself in a conversation, then you can practice this outside of the conversation itself.
Yes, you mentioned something very important there, which is silence. Like when you're saying, take a moment before you speak or respond. Silence is something that teachers find very difficult to contemplate or even allow to step into the conversation, because conversation seems to be words, but it's also silence. And I think that is something that is very important. So yes. Okay. Thank you, Hadi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that I notice a comment from Shahla. Did I pronounce your name right? I mean, that's a very interesting situation there, what Shahla describes.
Yeah, like what's the right amount of vulnerability to show? Especially, I think, in a professional context.
Yes. But that's a great one. So that's an excellent one. Thanks a lot, Shahla. In my view, you would bring the amount of vulnerability suitable that is enough to create a sense of familiarity, that I also face vulnerabilities, but not to the point of downloading on the other person in that context, but to be able to share with that person the fact that you also have vulnerabilities, that you're not all sorted out. Yeah. So just, it's almost as if you are giving a headline, but not downloading on the other person.
Can I say something on that? I think also it kind of comes down to like looking after yourself and burnout as well in this context, because I think like if you are finding that you're getting to the stage where you do want to cry all the time and you're like being overly vulnerable, like in a professional setting, that's when we all need to recognize that people need to take breaks. And like, I think all of us are familiar with that.
I think, you know, when we work as in any situation like mentoring vulnerable young people in certain organizations in the UK, what happens is every week, we as mentors, we have to sit together. We have to meet and sit together and talk with each other and have a different space of vulnerability with each other, because as I said, that the pressure of performance can actually end up creating what we want to be a very humanistic experience, a very robotic one. As Sarah says, for example, that we would we would like to just, we are focused on the results and not the process. So in any context where you have the privilege of having a one-on-one conversation with someone where you don't have the deadline or the legal advice or the forms that you have to finish, if you have this, focus on the process, trust the process within you, slow down, breathe slower, you know, and slowing down can be very, if you want to slow down here, you can literally tap your hand here to remind yourself to breathe slower. You can invite a slower breathing, and that can inspire a slower interaction as well. I wish so too, Shala. Sorry, my dog is... Sorry about the noises.
Juliana, are you trying to speak? We can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
Can hear you now, Juliana.
From the headphones. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so I thank you first of all. I think it was very interesting, everything. I just think like before being a coordinator, I was a female friendly space for a manager, for female friendly space manager for a year. And I think it would be nice, and I always try to coach the person, bringing my own personality, and like I like to make the space a fun space as well, where people could feel comfortable sharing also and discussing more sensitive topics. But when you work with refugees, in our case, I guess, in the everyday life, what they come up mostly it's with problems, and like they want solutions to their problems. So how would you move the conversation from coaching the problem to coaching the person, when what they want the most in like the short term is a solution, or like talking about the problem? That's my question.
Thanks a lot, Juliana. Well, again, I will stress that we are talking about the opportunities of trying to, that is a one-on-one conversation where, sorry, Kafka, can you go sit? Go sit, come on, good girl, go, come on, good girl. So it's a it's a context where it's outside of the formalized space, right? So it's less formal, it's more open. And you can look at the problems that are being shared with you as an experience, as an opportunity. So if we attach a different meaning to it, let's say somebody comes to talk about the problem. What do I do? What do I do? Well, or I want a solution now. I want a solution now. Invite some challenge. That's where your gut can come in here, where you can create a challenge, where you can invite them to report something very small. Sometimes it's also nice to flip the roles. What if you would like, hypothetically speaking, what if you have a problem and you don't have to share anything personal, but what if you share a hypothetical situation, right? And then invite them to give you their opinion about that hypothetical situation. What you're trying to do in here is that you're trying to create the space for the other person advising or say experiencing, voicing their own opinion rather than waiting for something from you, to flip the roles in a way.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there might be an option. True. Thanks.
Mm.
You're most welcome, Sarah. It was nice to have you. I'm glad it was useful. Bye. You're welcome, Claire. You're most welcome. Who should be doing most of the talking and the conversation? Ideally, not you. Ideally, your thinking partner. But
Yeah.
that doesn't always happen. But if someone must talk more than the other, then your thinking partner.
I just put a link in the chat. Sorry to change the subject, but before you go, guys, it would be great if you could click on the link. We just do a quick evaluation at the end of any webinar. It literally will take you 3 minutes. But carry on asking questions. I just noticed that some people are having to leave.
People have a lot of resilience and have found solutions to previous problems. So maybe part of the conversation is about helping them to recognize that. Absolutely.
Oh, great point. Yeah.
Absolutely. The whole point of yes, the whole point of that is to encourage the other person discover the agency they have within themselves, to trust that within themselves. Is that, when I say thinking partner, it also implies that you have the conviction that they are fully capable adults, despite all the issues that they're going through. And when you communicate this in a subtle way and in an explicit way, that person begins to change their own view about their own agency. So that's absolutely true, Karen. I cannot agree more. I think if we treat the conversation as a space of expressing our truth instead of trying to be perfect, it can remove any of the pressure that we could put on ourselves. I believe it's getting late. Is it dinner time in Greece now?
Yeah, I think I was embracing the silence, like you said, to see if anyone wanted.
It's only 5:12 here, but I'm worried for everyone, people getting hungry. Thank you, Shala. Yes, I think there is a recording, no, Olivia?
Yeah, this has been recorded. Yes, so we will share it probably the beginning of next week. Cool. Well, if anyone else has any questions, then feel free. But otherwise, shall we wrap things up? That was amazing, Hadi. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
Reflect for a while.
No, thank you very much for having me and for everyone who joined us. Really, I appreciate it, really. Thank you so much. I'm very happy. Thanks a lot, Sammy. Thank you. Thanks, Min. You're welcome, Elisa. Thank you. Thank you, Lina. Of course. Thanks, Elisa.
I actually took a screenshot of the boards because I thought they had some quite good points on. So I'm sure
Sure.
I'll take them as well. But
No, of course, I can share the presentation with you, or please.
I think
Yes.
everyone wrote some really good things on the paddle. What are they called? The paddle boards. Paddle. Not paddle.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, they were good.
Thank you, Vasilki. Yeah, Padlet is one of the things I really enjoy because you can collect a lot of information in a very fast time and everybody can see it.
I think as well there's less pressure than like talking, especially during the webinar and people are afraid to speak or something. It's nice because it's anonymous and you can just type.
Yeah. I totally agree. And people are anonymous, so you can really write anything there. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, sorry about my dog showing up in the...
It was a nice...
He can be really needy sometimes.
Did I hear what's your dog's name?
Kafka.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to stop recording. I don't know why I haven't done that.